I broke his nose! I intentionally headbutted the Alpha King. He licked the blood and smiled. The night air was thick with mist, curling around the roots of ancient trees like restless spirits. The blood-red moon hung low, casting long, twisted shadows that danced across the forest floor. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, its voice both mournful and warning. Lysara moved cautiously, every step deliberate, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and defiance. She had come for one purpose, to confront the man they whispered about in hushed tones, the Alpha King who ruled the forest and its surrounding lands with a power that frightened even the bravest knights. Her hand tightened around the hilt of her dagger, though she knew it would not save her if she was discovered. Kale, the Alpha King, was not a man to be fought in ordinary ways. Tales told of his eyes that glowed like amber in darkness, of strength beyond mortal men, and of a presence that made even the bravest soldiers bow before him. Lysara did not bow. She had refused to bow her entire life, and tonight she would prove that no man, no matter how powerful, could intimidate her. The trees parted suddenly, revealing a clearing illuminated by the moonlight. In the center stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and impossibly still. His hair fell like a dark waterfall, and his eyes, sharp and golden, seemed to pierce the shadows themselves. Kale! He moved before she could react, closing the distance between them with the ease of a predator. Yet there was something in his presence that made her skin prickle, not just fear, but something deeper, a strange curiosity that made her heart race. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and resonant, echoing slightly as if the forest itself had learned to speak through him. "This place is not meant for ordinary people." "I am not ordinary," Lysara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She met his gaze without flinching. "And I am not afraid of you." Kale's lips curved into a faint smile, a smile that did not reach his eyes. He studied her, the silence stretching between them like a taut string ready to snap. Then, without warning, Lysara stepped forward, and the world seemed to slow. She slammed her forehead into his chest, not out of recklessness, but with purpose. The sharp impact stunned him for a fraction of a second. She felt the strange warmth of his power brush against her, a force that seemed to both repel and invite. Kale did not strike her back. Instead, he chuckled, a sound deep and rough vibrating through the clearing. Then, astonishingly, he bent slightly and brushed his lips against the mark of her defiance, tasting the faint trace of blood that had sprung from the collision. "Interesting," he murmured, and for a heartbeat the forest held its breath. Lysara's eyes widened. Her chest heaved with the effort of standing firm. She had expected anger, punishment, maybe even death. Not this. Not fascination. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She had seen the stories of Kale's cruelty, but what she saw now was more dangerous: curiosity, intelligence, and a hunger that she could not name. "Do you always challenge those stronger than you?" Kale asked, stepping back, his expression unreadable. The shadows seemed to cling to him, making him appear even more formidable, almost unreal. "Do you always let people who insult you live?" Lysara shot back, her defiance burning brighter than the fear. Kale's eyes glimmered. "Not often," he said. "But you are not like others." The words should have been a warning. Instead, they stirred something inside her, a mixture of dread and fascination. Lysara realized with a shiver that she had not come simply to confront him. She had come because something within her demanded it. Something within Kale called to her, though she could not understand why. The forest, the moon, the very air seemed to pulse around them, alive with a magic neither fully human nor entirely divine. Kale moved closer again, slowly, deliberately. Lysara tightened her grip on her dagger, though it felt almost insignificant in the presence of his strength. He circled her like a hawk studying prey, but his gaze was not hungry in the way one would expect from a predator. It was searching, measuring, and somehow waiting. "You are brave," he said finally, voice softer now. "Or foolish." "I cannot decide which."
I am both, Lysara replied, her voice steady. I have to be.
The world does not favor the meek. A gust of wind stirred the leaves above, and in that movement it felt as though the forest itself was listening, watching, judging. Kale's expression shifted, the hard edge of his features softening for the briefest moment. Few speak like you, he admitted. Fewer survive speaking like you. Lysara felt a flicker of triumph, but also an uneasy warmth she could not name. The stories of the Alpha King had never mentioned this, the part of him that was drawn to challenge, to risk, to connect through defiance. For a moment, the mask of fearsome ruler slipped, revealing a man shaped by solitude and power, yearning for something he could not voice. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid words. Then a sudden rustle in the shadows reminded Lysara that the forest was alive with dangers far beyond either of them. Kale's eyes narrowed and his body tensed like a coiled spring. The threat was not just physical. It was magical, intangible, and deadly. You are reckless, Kale said, almost to himself. Reckless, and yet intriguing. I do not seek your approval, Lysara said, her voice firm, though a tremor of emotion betrayed her calm. No, he said softly, almost reluctantly. Perhaps not. But I will not let you leave without knowing. His gaze locked onto hers, intense and unyielding. That fate has a way of tying those who challenge each other together. The words sent a shiver through her spine. She did not understand entirely, but a deep instinct whispered that tonight was only the beginning. The forest around them seemed to respond, shadows lengthening and twisting, wind whispering secrets too ancient for human ears. Kale finally stepped back, straightening with a fluid grace that made him appear larger than life. Go! He commanded, though there was no cruelty in his tone. Leave this place. But know this! Your defiance has marked you. The forest will not forget, and neither will I. Lysara's heart raced as she backed away, her mind a storm of adrenaline and bewilderment. She had faced kings, bandits, and beasts, but this man, was unlike anything she had imagined. She wanted to flee, to run to the safety of the village, yet a part of her, the part that had led her here, longed to stay, to understand the man who had tasted her defiance and smiled. Before she disappeared into the shadows, she turned once, daring to meet his gaze again. Kale was watching her, expression inscrutable. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air humming with an electric tension that lingered even as she disappeared among the trees. The moon dipped lower, casting a crimson glow over the clearing where they had stood. Lysara ran, but not toward safety. She ran toward understanding, toward the strange magnetic pull that Kale represented. She did not know it yet, but their fates were now entwined, bound by blood, defiance, and something darker and more powerful than either had faced before. Somewhere deep in the forest, Kale remained silent as stone. He watched her retreating figure, and a rare, almost human sigh escaped him. He could feel it, the change in the air, the shift in destiny. Lysara's fire had awakened something in him, something long buried beneath centuries of rule, solitude, and shadow. And in that moment, neither the forest, the moon, nor the king could ignore it. Their story had begun. The wind carried whispers of prophecy through the trees. Two souls bound by defiance, drawn together by a force neither could fully understand, their paths destined to collide in ways both perilous and transformative. Kale bent his head slightly, brushing the faint trace of blood left by her headbutt on his chest. Interesting, he murmured again, though now the word carried weight, promise, and a warning. Very interesting indeed. And in the village beyond the forest, Lysara's absence was already noted. Her people feared the forest, but she had stepped willingly into its heart, and unknowingly into the orbit of a king whose power, charm, and darkness could either destroy her or change her forever. The night stretched on, long and endless, as both of them pondered the other. Neither had spoken their names, but in silence a connection had been forged. Fragile, yet unbreakable. The forest held its breath, Fate had begun its quiet weaving. The forest had claimed her footsteps, but it could not claim her spirit. Lysara emerged into a narrow valley where the trees thinned, revealing jagged cliffs that caught the last glow of the red-tinged moon. Her chest heaved from the exertion, and her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the memory of Kale's presence. Even now she could feel it, a lingering heat in the air, a whisper of power that refused to let her forget. She had thought escaping the clearing meant freedom. She had thought the forest would hide her. But Kale's shadow was long. It stretched across her path, unseen but undeniable. A sudden gust of wind carried a soft rustle, and Lysara froze. Then, like a phantom stepping from the mist, Kale appeared before her. He did not move like a man running through the woods. He moved like the wind itself, sudden, silent, unstoppable. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice smooth but carrying the weight of authority. "The forest is not forgiving."
"I am not afraid," Lysara replied, steadying her voice even as her heart raced.
"I can handle myself." Kale's golden eyes studied her, sharp and unwavering. For a moment there was no motion, no sound except the distant calls of unseen creatures. Then he spoke again, his tone quieter now, almost patient. "Few can claim that and live," he said. Before she could respond, Kale extended a hand. "Not a command, not a threat, simply a hand, steady and deliberate. Come with me," he said. "If you truly seek answers, you will need guidance. The forest is only the beginning." Lysara's instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to keep her distance. Yet, beneath the fear, there was a pull she could not deny. Something in Kale's gaze promised knowledge, understanding, and perhaps a challenge worthy of her fire. Reluctantly, she took his hand. The journey to his citadel was silent except for the whispers of the trees and the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet. The castle rose from the cliffs like a monument of dark stone and shadow. Towers twisted toward the sky, their spires sharp as obsidian, windows glowing faintly with an inner light. A storm seemed always to linger above it, though the sky beyond the forest was calm. Inside, the air was cooler, carrying the faint scent of old stone and magic. Lysara's eyes darted around. The halls were vast, lined with tapestries depicting battles, kings, and creatures that no mortal should see. Shadows clung to corners, shifting and almost alive. Here, she realized fully, this was not just a castle. It was a kingdom of power, a place where the very walls held memories, secrets, and perhaps a warning. Kale led her to a room at the heart of the citadel. It was simple compared to the rest of the castle, a large chamber with tall windows that let in the muted glow of moonlight, the stone walls unadorned save for faint carvings that hinted at ancient magic. "Not as a prisoner, but as a guest, for now. You need rest, and I need to know more about you." Lysara's hands clenched instinctively. She did not trust him. Yet she did not feel the sharp terror of a captive either. There was something measured in his restraint, a silent power that insisted respect. She nodded stiffly, though her heart rebelled against the thought of staying under his roof. Time passed in silence. Lysara explored the room, touching the walls, the cold stone, the faint carvings that pulsed faintly under her fingertips. Every so often she would glance at the doorway, half expecting Kale to appear suddenly. He did not. But she could feel his presence, as if he moved through the castle unseen, like a shadow she could not escape. When he finally entered, the room seemed to shift. Kale's presence was magnetic, heavy with a strange mixture of danger and allure. He did not sit. He did not speak at once. He simply observed, silent and deliberate, until Lysara could no longer meet his gaze without faltering. "You are bold," he said finally, his voice low. "Few would enter my forest, challenge me, and walk away with their spirit intact. Most leave broken, or not at all." "I am not like most people," Lysara replied, though her voice carried a tremor she could not entirely hide. "And I do not bow to men, even kings." Kale's lips curved into a smile faint and unreadable. You do not bow, he said.
Yet you are here, in my home.
Under my eyes. That is a kind of surrender, too!
There was no malice in his words, yet their weight pressed against her like a stone in her chest. She did not know whether to be angry, fearful, or fascinated. Kale's presence was intoxicating in a way she had never experienced, both a challenge and a warning, a danger and a lure.
You are a mystery, Kale said, pacing slowly across the room. And mysteries are dangerous. Even for me. I do not seek to be dangerous, Lysara said. I only seek the truth about you. About this forest. About the king who rules it.
Kale stopped, turning to face her fully. His eyes glimmered like molten gold in the moonlight.
The truth is not always kind, he said, and it is rarely safe. Do you understand that?
I understand more than you think, Lysara replied. For the first time, Kale paused, his expression softening just slightly.
Perhaps it was respect. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was something he did not fully recognize in himself. Few speak to me like this, he admitted. Fewer survive speaking to me like this. You intrigue me.
The moment stretched, filled with unspoken words, unsaid promises, and an unacknowledged tension that neither could break. Lysara realized that their meeting in the forest was only the beginning. Kale was no ordinary man, and she was no ordinary woman.
Together, they were a storm, waiting to be unleashed. But the citadel was not without its dangers.
A faint tremor ran through the stone beneath their feet, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to twist unnaturally. Kale's expression hardened.
You are not the only one here, he said quietly. There are eyes that watch even here. Forces that do not forgive intrusion. Lysara's gaze sharpened. You mean spies? Or magic? P-L-A. Kale's lips tightened. Both! And worse! You have stepped into a world far older and more dangerous than your village life prepared you for. Your defiance is admired, but it is also a target. The weight of his words settled over her, but she did not retreat. She would not.
Lysara straightened, meeting his gaze with renewed determination.
I am not afraid,
she said again. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, almost reluctantly, and gestured toward the window. Outside, the moonlight fell across the spires of the castle, glinting off jagged stones and casting long shadows. The forest does not forgive mistakes, he said. And neither does the world beyond these walls. If you survive this night, it will be because you are stronger than you know, or because I decide to let you live. Lysara's pulse quickened, but she did not back down. Then I will survive, she said. Even if it means facing you. Kale's golden eyes narrowed slightly, as though weighing her words against some unseen measure. Then, to her surprise, he spoke softly, almost to himself. Perhaps that is what I hoped to see. Shadows shifted in the corners, the castle seemed to breathe, and the air was thick with a magic that neither fully understood. Lysara could feel the pull of Kale's presence, the strange tension that tugged at her heart, at her mind. There was danger here, yes, but there was also something else. Something that whispered of connection, of challenge, of a force neither could resist. Suddenly a distant sound echoed through the halls. A low, deliberate knocking, or perhaps the whisper of stone shifting under ancient magic. Kale's expression darkened. You are not safe, he said. Not even here. And soon you will understand why the forest drew you and why I allowed you to survive it. Lysara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had thought that surviving the forest was the hardest challenge. Now she understood that it was only the beginning. There were forces at work here, older than kings, older than kingdoms, and they were watching, waiting for a misstep. Kale moved closer, his presence overwhelming, but he did not touch her. He only spoke, voice low and deliberate.
You have awakened something in me, Lysara, something I thought long dead. And now, you cannot leave. Not entirely.
Not without consequences. Lysara met his gaze, fierce and unyielding.
Then I will face whatever comes, she said, even if it means standing beside you.
Bold, he said, and reckless. That is what makes you extraordinary. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse as if alive. Outside, the moon dipped lower, bleeding its red light across the castle walls. Lysara understood, with a mix of fear and awe, that her journey had only begun, and that Kale, the Alpha King, was both her greatest challenge and the only one who could guide her through the dangers ahead.
The castle was never quiet. Even in the dead of night, whispers echoed through the halls, ancient echoes of kings and queens long gone, of battles fought and promises broken.
Lysara moved through the corridors, her footsteps soft on the cold stone, but her mind was restless. The forest, the castle, Kale, they all haunted her thoughts. She had thought she understood danger before meeting him, but the man who ruled this place was not a simple threat. He was a storm, impossible to resist, impossible to control, and yet strangely magnetic. The shadow at the gates had come to pass. A messenger arrived at dawn, cloaked and hooded, bearing warnings from lands beyond the forest. A rebellion stirred in the southern kingdoms, threatening not just Kale's rule, but the delicate balance of power that kept Arendor safe. Villagers had begun vanishing, magic had gone awry in distant towns, and rumors spread of creatures emerging from the forests to the south. Kale received the news silently, but Lysara saw the tension in his shoulders.
He moved with the precision of a predator, making decisions that were both ruthless and calculated. Yet beneath it all, she sensed a vulnerability he never showed the world, a fear not for himself, but for the lands and people under his protection.
"You should stay here," Kale said as she followed him into the council chamber. The room was vast, with maps stretched across tables and candles flickering, casting shadows that seemed to breathe.
This is not a place for a woman untrained in court and war.
I am no ordinary woman, Lysara replied, her voice steady. She did not flinch as his golden gaze fell on her, assessing her, weighing her worth against the trials ahead.
I have faced forests, beasts, and kings. I can face this too.
Kale regarded her silently. Then, slowly, he nodded. Perhaps, he admitted. Perhaps you can.
But you will need to understand the rules of this realm first. Their alliance, forced though it was, became necessary. A rebellion was rising, fueled by whispers of dark magic and forgotten curses, and the forest itself, the living heart of Kale's kingdom, stirred with a power that both threatened and protected.
They could not face it apart. They would have to face it together. Lysara learned quickly.
The castle was more than stone and shadow. It was a living testament to Kale's rule and power. The halls remembered every secret, every betrayal, every triumph.
Magic hummed through the walls, responding to Kale's will, shifting subtly when his mood changed.
She realized that understanding him required understanding the castle, the forest, and the magic that flowed through both.
For Kale, the presence of Lysara was a revelation. Her defiance, which once sparked a challenge in him, now provoked something deeper. He found himself listening when she spoke, watching when she moved, and admiring, not just for her courage, but for her mind, her spirit. Yet he did not allow himself to show it.
He was a king, a ruler of shadows and flame, and he could not bend to fascination. But fascination was impossible to hide entirely. It lingered in his eyes, in the softening of his voice when speaking to her alone, in the rare moments when his guard slipped. Lysara noticed these moments, and they drew her closer, though she fought it, knowing how dangerous it was to trust a man so powerful, so unpredictable. The rebellion struck before the sun had fully risen. Word came of raiding parties at the borders of Arendor, of villages burned and soldiers missing.
Kale prepared immediately, gathering his forces and magical wards. Lysara insisted on joining, arguing that she could help, not with brute force, but with strategy, observation, and her own knowledge of the land. Kale hesitated, the golden light in his eyes flickering like fire against steel. "It is not safe for you," he said. "Even here, danger surrounds us. The magic, the rebels, they do not hesitate." "I am not afraid of danger," Lysara said. Her voice was calm, unwavering. "I face it because I choose to, not because I am forced." For a brief moment, Kale's expression softened, and she saw the man beneath the king, a man shaped by isolation, by centuries of responsibility, and by the weight of decisions he could not undo. "Then you will stay close," he said at last. "But do not mistake proximity for protection. You must protect yourself." Together, they left the castle and entered the outskirts of the kingdom, where smoke rose from distant villages and the cries of the afflicted pierced the morning air. Lysara's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the intensity of the moment, the tangible weight of danger, the gravity of responsibility, and the unspoken tension between her and Kale. The first skirmish was sudden and brutal, though not with bloodshed that could be called cruel. Kale's forces met rebels armed with dark magic, sending the attackers fleeing. Lysara watched closely, noting the patterns, the strengths and weaknesses of both sides. In the heat of the moment, Kale's hand brushed against hers, a fleeting contact, almost accidental, yet electric. Neither spoke, yet both felt the spark that passed between them. As night fell, they camped in the ruins of a burned village. The firelight flickered against their faces, casting shadows that made them appear both closer and more distant than they were. Lysara tended to minor injuries among the survivors, her hands steady, her heart quietly daring to hope that perhaps there was more to Kale than fear and legend. Kale watched her, silent, his golden eyes reflecting the flames. "You are relentless," he said softly, voice barely above the crackle of fire. "Even here, surrounded by ruin, you persist." "I have to," Lysara replied. "Not just for myself." "For them, for the people who cannot fight for themselves." He was silent for a long time, and in that silence Lysara realized how unusual it was for him to speak openly at all. The man who ruled with such absolute power now shared fragments of his thoughts, fragments of a soul buried beneath centuries of duty and shadow. Then came the night attack. Figures emerged from the darkness, twisted shadows wielding cursed magic, creatures shaped from nightmares. The camp erupted into chaos. Lysara and Kale fought side by side, not with brute strength alone, but with strategy, intuition, and a shared understanding that had grown between them over the past days. Every glance, every subtle motion was a conversation of its own, a language of survival and trust. In the chaos, Kale was struck by a spell meant for Lysara. Without thinking, she lunged to shield him, taking the brunt of the magic herself. He recovered quickly, sending the attackers fleeing, but his eyes were fixed on her, wide with concern and a rare, unguarded emotion. "Fear. You should not have done that," he said, his voice tight, barely controlled. "I do not allow this. I did it because I chose to," Lysara replied, though pain flared through her arm. "Not because I had to." Kale's jaw tightened. He wanted to scold, to command, to assert his dominance, but he found he could not. She had acted with bravery, with independence, and with a spirit that refused to bend, and yet she had also exposed herself to danger, and that was something he could not ignore. The night passed slowly. Lysara's injury was minor, but the impact of their shared battle lingered. Kale tended to her, his hands steady, though his eyes were intense, studying her with an attention that was almost unbearable. "You are unlike anyone I have known," he said finally, voice quiet, almost vulnerable. "Few survive defiance and fewer still do it with heart. You are dangerous, Lysara, but not the kind I feared." She met his gaze, the firelight reflecting in her own eyes. "And you?" she asked softly. "Are you afraid of me?" Kale hesitated. His golden eyes darkened, shadows flickering across his face.
I do not know what I feel, he admitted. Fear, respect, something else, something I have not felt in a long time. Perhaps I am intrigued.
The word lingered in the air between them, charged with meaning neither could fully define.
The rebellion, the forest, the kingdom. All of it was still dangerous, still uncertain.
And yet, for the first time, Lysara sensed a connection between them, a fragile bridge built of trust, defiance, and a spark of something unspoken. They did not speak much more that night. Words felt unnecessary. The silence itself was enough, a shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that their fates were intertwined. The fire burned low, shadows stretched across the ruins, and the wind carried whispers of prophecy and warning. Dawn broke, pale and uncertain, over the kingdom. The camp was quiet now, the remnants of battle smoldering. Lysara rose first, stretching her aching limbs, and Kale watched her silently, a rare softness in his gaze. He did not speak, and she did not ask. They both understood that the days ahead would test them, not just in battle but in trust, in loyalty, and in the uncharted territory of their growing bond. The forest beyond the valley awaited, alive with unseen eyes and untold magic. The rebellion was far from over, and the forces they faced were more dangerous than either could yet imagine. And somewhere in the distance a shadow watched, a figure cloaked in mystery, intent on disrupting the fragile alliance that had formed between Lysara and Kale. For now they were united, not by choice, but by circumstance. And in that unity a quiet spark of possibility had emerged, a possibility that they could survive, perhaps even thrive together. Yet the future was uncertain, and the night held secrets that would test not only their courage but the very essence of who they were. The night was heavier than usual, the moon swallowed behind thick clouds that blotted out the sky. The castle, normally alive with shadow and whispers, was eerily silent. Lysara moved cautiously through the corridors, senses alert, every step measured. Her heart pounded, not with fear alone, but with the weight of responsibility that now rested upon her.
Kale, the Alpha King, had been struck during the night attack. She found him in the main hall, slumped against a pillar, his golden eyes half closed, his breathing shallow. The rebel strike had been sudden and precise, a curse unleashed from shadows beyond the forest. The magic that had struck him was unfamiliar, dark and corrosive. He had fought with his usual mastery, but even he had limits. And now, those limits lay bare before her. Lysara knelt beside him, placing her hands over the wound. The room seemed to pulse with his fading energy, a soft hum of power that was almost alive. Her mind raced. She knew of rituals and magic, the old, forbidden knowledge whispered among scholars and seers. She had never dared attempt it, never believed she would be forced to. Yet now, staring at Kale, she realized that the choice was no longer theoretical. "You cannot do this alone," Kale murmured, voice barely audible, a flicker of his usual defiance still present even in weakness. "You must leave, survive. This is not your burden. I choose to stay," Lysara said firmly, though her hands shook. "I cannot leave you. Not now. Not ever." Kale's gaze softened, gold meeting brown with an intensity that caught her breath. For the first time, vulnerability touched him fully. The King of Shadows, the Alpha who ruled the forest with power beyond imagination, was human in this moment, reliant, fragile, and dependent on her courage. The ritual was complex. Lysara drew symbols in the air, tracing ancient patterns from memory and instinct. Magic hummed beneath her fingertips, responding to her will. The spell required focus, trust, and strength of heart. Kale, though weakened, placed a hand over hers, lending his own life force to steady hers. Together, they became the conduit for something neither could have done alone. Pain surged through her, the strain of channeling such power nearly overwhelming. She grit her teeth and pressed on, refusing to falter. Kale's voice guided her softly, his golden eyes never leaving hers. "Do not fear the darkness," he whispered. "It will test you, but it will not break you.
Minutes stretched into eternity, the room vibrating with energy as shadows swirled around them. Lysara's focus wavered, but Kale's hand remained steady, anchoring her, reminding her that they were not alone.
Finally, with a final pulse of light, the spell completed.
Kale's breathing evened. The wound began to close, and the oppressive shadows in the room dissolved. He looked at her, fully alert now, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Exhausted, shaken, but alive. Lysara felt an unexpected warmth bloom in her chest, a mixture of relief, admiration, and something deeper, something unspoken that passed silently between them. "You saved me!" Kale said softly, his voice almost a whisper.
I did not save you for gratitude,
Lysara replied, her gaze steady.
I did it because I could not leave you to face this alone.
Kyle studied her, his golden eyes reflecting both pride and awe.
You are extraordinary, he murmured. Not just brave, but boundless. You see beyond the darkness, beyond fear, beyond me. You are remarkable. The words hung in the air, heavier than any sword, brighter than any spell.
Lysara's pulse quickened, not from danger, but from the closeness of him, the raw honesty that filled the room like light spilling through broken stone. Outside, dawn broke slowly, pale and hesitant. The forest whispered softly, the wind carrying the scent of rain and earth.
Life returned to the land around the castle, but the rebellion was not over.
The shadowy figure that had struck them was still at large, hidden among the mountains, waiting for opportunity. Yet the bond forged between Lysara and Kale had changed everything. They were no longer merely allies, they were partners, bound by choice, courage, and mutual respect. Days passed, each filled with rebuilding and preparation.
Kale resumed his duties as king, but now with Lysara at his side, not as a subordinate, not as a subject, but as an equal. She learned to navigate the castle, to read the subtle language of shadows and magic that Kale understood instinctively.
She learned the strategies and responsibilities of leadership, and in turn, Kale began to show her parts of himself he had never revealed to anyone. They trained together, fought together, and spent hours in quiet conversation, speaking of fears, regrets, and hopes. Kale admitted fragments of his past, the loneliness, the betrayal, the weight of power that had hardened him over centuries. Lysara spoke of her own defiance, her desire for justice, and her refusal to bow to cruelty. Through it all, their connection deepened. Not with hurried passion, but with the slow, steady burn of understanding, trust, and admiration. They were two souls shaped by strength and shadow, learning to navigate both the darkness of the world and the uncharted territory of each other's hearts. Yet peace was fragile. The shadowy figure returned, striking once more at the borders of the kingdom, testing their alliance, their strength, and their trust.
The attack was swift, precise, and unnervingly familiar. Someone who understood both Kale and Lysara, someone who sought to unravel the bond they had forged. Kale prepared to face the threat alone, but Lysara refused.
"Not this time," she said firmly. "We face it together.
Whatever comes, we do not face it apart."
For a long moment, Kale studied her, golden eyes meeting hers, searching for any hint of doubt. Finding none, he nodded. "Then together," he said, and together they rode into the storm, side by side, their presence a force neither shadow nor magic could easily overcome. The battle was fierce, testing not only their skills but their understanding of one another. Shadows swirled, curses were cast, and magic flashed in brilliant arcs across the night sky. Yet through every challenge, every strike, and every risk, they moved as one, anticipating, protecting, and supporting each other. The shadowy figure faltered, unable to match their unity. Finally, with a coordinated effort, they defeated the enemy. The figure fled, leaving behind only whispers of threats and promises of return.
Kale and Lysara stood together amid the aftermath, exhausted but victorious. Kale turned to her, eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "You have changed everything," he said. "Not just for me, but for the kingdom, for the forest, for me."
Lysara felt her heart tighten, a warmth spreading through her chest.
We have changed everything, she replied. Together!
For a moment the world was still, the forest quiet, the storm passing into calm. And in that silence they understood something neither had expected. The bond they shared was not forged by necessity alone, but by choice, courage, and the quiet recognition of each other's strength. Kale reached for her hand, steady and deliberate.
You have my trust, he said, and my respect. You are not just remarkable, Lysara. You are necessary.
Lysara met his gaze, her own eyes filled with understanding. And you are not just a king, she said softly.
You are a man who can change, who can choose differently, who can
be more.
The castle, the forest, the kingdom.
They all seemed to exhale, the tension of centuries lifted slightly by the choices of two souls willing to stand together. The day that followed was quiet, almost ordinary, yet extraordinary in its implications. Kale and Lysara walked through the forest together side by side, speaking little but understanding much.
Every step, every glance, every brush of hands carried unspoken promises, a silent acknowledgement of what they had faced and what they would face in the future. The rebellion may have been quelled, but challenges remained. Magic, shadows, and those who coveted power would always test the kingdom. Yet Lysara and Kale faced the unknown with a bond stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, and tempered by the fires of trial, trust, and choice.
In the heart of the forest, the red moon rose again, its light softer now, no longer harsh or threatening.
Lysara and Kale paused beneath its glow, the air heavy with magic, history, and promise. Whatever comes, Lysara said quietly, we face it together.
Together, he echoed. And in that single word, a world of meaning unfolded. Trust, respect, courage, and the quiet, unyielding spark of love that neither had expected, yet neither could deny. And as the forest whispered around them, as the castle held its secrets close, they knew this. Their story was only beginning. Shadows would rise, challenges would come, but together they could withstand anything.
Their fates, intertwined, had transformed them, not by power, not by magic, but by the choice to face the world side by side.
The forest would remember their bond, and in the quiet, timeless space where moonlight met shadow, two souls once shaped by defiance and isolation had found redemption, transformation, and each other.